Welcome back. My next guest is Oren Getz, a U.S. Army veteran. Welcome, Oren.
Thank you.
Oren, I'm delighted to have you on the program. I've known you for a number of years. I've seen you in action at the Jewish War Vets and a lot of community involvement that you're involved with. You're involved with the, the MTA
Correct.
in a very important role. And maybe at the end we can kind of get to that. But you're on for our veterans segment, and where we really kind of put a focus and a spotlight on our veterans and the service that they've rendered to our country. And you served during a very interesting time. You served during the Cold War, and you served in Germany, which was,
Right.
frankly, the front lines, if you will, of the Cold War. So we're going to get to that in a moment. So what I'd like to do is just have you talk a little bit about your background, where you were born, raised, how long you've been living here.
Okay. I was born actually in New York City, but our family moved to Great Neck, Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in Great Neck, Long Island, and went through the schools there and graduated from Great Neck High School. It was the last class before they had North and South High School. Mm-hmm. Now they have North and South. When I graduated, I went to MIT, mm-hmm. and MIT had an ROTC program, and I went through the ROTC program, which made me eligible to become a second lieutenant in the United States Army.
Oh, wow.
So I was in the Signal Corps, and I thought I would be stationed in the United States, but they sent me to Germany. Mm-hmm. And I was stationed with the 7th Army Stock Control Center, which was the supply unit for the United States Army in Germany. And it was a very interesting time at that, to be there. Mm-hmm. Germany had been rebuilt and was doing fairly well at that time. But of course, it was right at the time that the Berlin Wall went up, right. which was a matter of concern. Mm-hmm. So we were on alert for that. But we were primarily doing our military duties.
But before we get a little deeper into that, let's back up a little bit. So you went to MIT and you got involved in the ROTC program. But,
right.
So when did you graduate from MIT?
I graduated in 1962.
All right. So you graduated MIT 62, and then you had to do your military service.
Right.
Correct?
Originally, I thought I'd be doing 6 months, but they sent me for 2 years. Okay. And actually, I was able to extend for another 6 months to do some more traveling around Europe, which was a great opportunity that was afforded me. So I spent the time to see a little more of Europe on my own, right. Before I was discharged from the Army.
So you were over so roughly 2 years in Europe and an extra 6 months. So yeah. 2.5 years. So let's talk a little bit about. So you had your ROTC training, but when you went in for your regular duty within the Army. Where were you first stationed?
I was stationed in one town. Mm-hmm. It was called Zweibrücken, mm-hmm. which was near the French border. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because it was a NATO town. Mm-hmm. There were not only us, the United States Army, we had Air Force there, we had Canadian Air Force, we had French there, and we had the German Bundeswehr there. Oh, really? All in this one little city. So it was a very interesting place to be at the time, and it gave us a good opportunity to meet people from other countries.
Right. And so here you are, I guess you're in your 20s, right?
I was in my 20s.
You're in your 20s, and you're over in Germany. Now that must have been pretty interesting as well, because I know that you're involved with the Jewish War Vets.
Correct.
And did you have an opportunity to do much traveling, as it relates to some of the sites from World War II or any of the concentration camps or anything connected to the Holocaust when you were in the Army?
I did, but I spent more time actually seeing more of the regular sites.
Right.
And that was very interesting. Mm-hmm. I was able to get to England, Scotland. I was able also to get to many places in Europe, mm-hmm. which was very, very interesting. And the most interesting place I ever got to was Berlin.
Really?
Because at that time, Berlin was still an occupied city. Mm-hmm. It was 110 miles inside communist East Germany. and we had to take a special train into Berlin, and the train was sealed. You couldn't get on or off the train until it went from West Germany to West Berlin.
Wow.
And once we got there, we were able to travel around. And the wall had just gone up, and it was a big difference seeing the difference between East Berlin, and West Berlin.
Well, tell us a little bit about that. What from your recollection, what were some of the major differences that you can recall?
Well, West Berlin looked like a very prosperous place. Their economy had improved. People were living a pretty decent life. But East Berlin looked very morbid. We traveled around there. We saw very few people walking around on the streets. The buildings still looked run down. It was really a kind of a desperate place. I didn't realize that it was going to be that desperate. And of course, the wall was up, so people from East Berlin could not travel into West Berlin. Right. It was also interesting that West Berliners could not travel into East Berlin because of the status of being an occupied city. But West Germans and Americans could travel through East Germany.
Wow. So let me get that distinction clearly. So West Germans could go back and forth.
Yes.
But West Berliners could not.
Yes.
Huh. And I would presume because there was fear that they would try and help get people from East.
Oh,
East
they
Berlin.
did.
Yeah.
That's when they had quite a few of the spectacular escapes from East Berlin. They even made movies about it,
right.
Building tunnels underneath the Berlin Wall and all of that stuff. It was all going on when we were there. Right. I also had the opportunity of going up to the wall and taking a little piece of it home.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
And a West Berlin policeman came to me and said, "No, no, no." And I said, "Yes, a souvenir." And then a big smile came on his face. He said, if all the Americans came by and took a piece of this wall home, that would be a big improvement to West Berlin.
Yeah, yeah. It's so hard to fathom these days because the wall came down, I guess, right after Ronald Reagan left the presidency in
right.
89 or 90, and so we're going on almost 30 years.
Correct.
So all three of my children, my oldest is 20, she'll be 27 when this airs. My son is 21, and my youngest is 17. She'll be 17 when this airs. They have no conception, other than from the history books, of what life was like and what the Cold War was really like. They've grown up in an era of terrorism and terrorist attacks and its own horrors, but the horrors that we lived through and the fear that we had with the Cold War, that we were on the verge of atomic war, and that we were and we had conflict after conflict after conflict that sprung up at some part in the world, or other part of the world where the U.S. and its surrogates were taking on the Soviets and their surrogates, and this whole concept of a divided Germany and a divided Berlin is absolutely foreign to anybody under the age of 30. They don't know about it, they didn't experience it, and their only conception of it is what they read in the history books, and the treatment of it. But you had a ringside seat, if you will, and a real opportunity to experience it, even to take a piece of the Berlin Wall home with you. I go up to frequently up to meetings with other town supervisors, and I was marveled. There's a chunk of the Berlin Wall outside of Stony Point, some of the buildings that Stony Point owns on the old Letchworth Village grounds, which is now, I think, their court building, and it's a big piece of the Berlin Wall. And I remember driving by there with my youngest, and she's like, "What is that?" I said, "It's a piece of the Berlin Wall," and she was like, "Dad, really?" And she knew about it from the history books, but she had never experienced it or seen it, and so there's no real conception of kind of what you lived through. It must have been somewhat, a scary time to be over in Germany, with the conflict that was taking place between the Soviets and the Americans at that point when you were there.
Well, I had many Russian soldiers stationed in East Germany, because East Germany was a surrogate state, and they had a puppet government there that was affiliated with the Soviet Union. And once that all collapsed, things changed quite a bit. It's interesting to note that the wall that actually came down in 1989 was the second wall. They had originally built a first wall, which was very crude, and that's the one I had seen, which was made out of cinder block and was much lower, and actually had on the top of it actually had barbed wire. And then later they made a much taller wall behind that one that was rounded on the top and was more difficult to climb over or climb under.
Right. And now, just remarkable period in time. Oren, you're also very much involved with the Jewish American War Veterans. Can you talk to us a little bit about that organization?
Well, the Jewish War Veterans of the United States of America is the oldest veterans organization. It's over 120 years old, and so it's been around for quite a while. And it's very active. It's headquartered in Washington, D.C., and we have local chapters, posts, excuse me, that are very active here. There's a big post in Spring Valley. We have a regional organization, and I'm the quartermaster of the regional organization. So we have meetings and conventions, and we really support the veterans here in Rockland County.
Right. Now you do some great work. I try and get to your breakfast a couple of times a year,
Right.
And very much enjoy and seeing all the folks that are involved with
Right.
that group. So we're almost out of time, but I would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about your experience with the MTA. Maybe you could talk to our viewers a little bit about the role that you play with the MTA and help us here in Clarkstown.
Well, I was appointed through the governor's appointment office, a recommendation from our county executive, to the Metro North Rail Commuter Council. And that's part of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. And because I am vice chairman of the Metro North Rail Commuter Council, I'm on the executive committee. So we meet and really pushed for improvements to service throughout the entire MTA district, but we're also very keen on getting improvements here in Rockland County. We've gotten some improvements, and right now we're pushing very hard on New Jersey Transit to restore the service that was cut because of their engineer shortage.
Right. Yeah. No. It's we're in the throes. And by the time this airs, we may have already had our first public hearing on the transit-oriented development rezoning in downtown Nanuet. And one of the things, obviously, we're fortunate to have a train stop and the Pascack line that comes through our town. But the reality is, there have been some cutbacks in services, and
Right.
and we certainly want to see not only those restored, but the service enhanced, because it certainly is a unique opportunity for us in Clarkstown and in Rockland County. It's really one of the best ways to get into New York City, but frankly, they need to do some more upgrades, in the services there.
Well, real quick, I was directly responsible for getting the first express train on the Pascack Valley line weekdays that runs from Nanuet, Pearl River, and then directly into Secaucus and Hoboken.
Right.
They put on a second one, but unfortunately that was the one that was cut, and that's the one we're pushing very hard
Right.
to restore.
Yeah, no, it's super important to make sure that we get the express lines back. I mean, you can get down in just under an hour,
Right.
to transfer over, and on an express train. So we want to see more of those, because those will fill up, and you get folks that can get down to the city very, very quickly. So it's a very positive thing.
Right.
Well, so anyway, Oren, I want to thank you for being such a great guest.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your service with with Metro North, with the Commuter Council. But more importantly, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
And as a veteran, and for all that you do within our community through the Jewish War Vets, through the MTA Council, through the senior programs that you're involved with, in the leadership role that you invariably find yourself in.
Okay.
So I want to thank you for all that and for being such a great guest.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Stay tuned for our next guest. Coming up will be Dennis Letson, our Director of Facilities and Engineering. We'll be right back.